Hi, so this is our first in the series that we're now calling Process and Performance, and we're going to do these interviews once a month with some of the great artists that we have in the theater working today, and the first of whom is Ellen Lauren. Just a quick note about the project and how and why we're doing it and what's going on. It started off, I have to say thanks to Jim Nicola and Linda Chapman, who weren't able to be with us tonight, who run this brilliant theater. And I came to them with an idea, and Linda helped me develop it, about how we kind of expand the way we as actors talk to each other about the work. And it was spawned out of, I went to Juilliard and got a very specific kind of training there that was very much based on what I think a lot of acting training in America is based on, which is naturalism and Stanislavski. And then I ended up seeing some crazy-ass theater, the City Company included, the Wooster Group included, and my head kind of exploded. And I thought, this is not theater, these are not plays, this can't happen. And I had a slight breakdown, and a very good friend kind of walked me through it. And a few of you in this room probably have walked through that with me. And I ended up realizing this is actually my favorite kind of work, what we call avant-garde work, or semi-avant-garde work, or non-traditional work. So all these conversations are kind of going to be about, definitely going to be about the traditional ways of working in the theater versus what is considered the avant-garde. And so that's where it kind of came up. I came up with it. That's what we're talking about. And Ellen Lauren, I'm sure you all know because you're here seeing her for a reason, but she's the Associate Artistic Director of the City Company, and I could say their lead actress. I'll say their lead actress. She might know. I consider her their lead actor. Or do you like actor or actress? I don't know.
I like the word actor.
Actor, lead actor. She also runs the Suzuki Institute. Yeah, is that what it's called?
I'm an associate artist in the Suzuki Company of Toga in Japan, and I teach for him his summer program.
And she has performed with City and with Toga all over the world and all over this country before being in City and before working with Suzuki at just about every regional theater you can imagine. And she just finished doing The Trojan Women in Malibu at the Getty Museum there. And she is on the faculty in Toga, Japan, Suzuki, and at the Juilliard School. So that's a little introduction to Ellen. And
that's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff.
And so, do you believe in the what is the avant-garde? I guess that'll be the first question. Define the avant-garde. What do you?
All right, Nick, you gotta take it off.
Do you believe in that term?
Do I believe in that term? First, I really mean this. I feel very nervous and humbled, and I recognize that there are my colleagues in the room and peers, and there's really, I understand, I'm probably more than likely, if I say something you agree with, it will sound like I'm smart, but all I can really do is try to articulate things that I understand many of you have either shared with me or that we share in common, so I'm not here to pontificate about that. I just feel like I need to establish that because I do have colleagues and friends in the room. The avant-garde, it's interesting when you said tradition, a traditional way, and the avant-garde way, because I'm actually a very traditional person, but I'm traditional in the oldest sense of that word. And in the idea, for me, my understanding so far, that the avant-garde, before the front, what it really means is, and my mentors have taught me, is the collision point where tradition meets the weight of having to create new things with old stuff. This thing called avant-garde isn't denying or getting rid of tradition, it's simply reinventing it, transforming it, and using old things, ancient things, to make contemporary work in the world. And this means, along the way, a lot of feelings get hurt, a lot of mentors feel crushed and betrayed, because you have to take old things that you're taught and gifted with and make your own way with it. You can't buy anything wholesale. It's something that people think that I've done, for instance, with my relationship with this man named Suzuki Tadashi, in buying it wholesale, which you have to take it all on and then push through that and make your own statement with it that stays within a respectful dialogue with that person that handed you those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for me, the avant-garde, it's a scary word, isn't it? It always makes me think of black fishnets and, you know, smoky rat skellers. But it's really a collision point.
Yeah.
And it can, the avant-garde can take place in any kind of traditional setting. In the regional theater, for instance, is a traditional setting for making theater in this country. And I think that it lives and breathes in the bones of that kind of theater too. But that's what I'm interested in, actually, is studying, really studying and taking apart old forms and old rules and skill sets that haven't always been the basis of making good theater.
Have you ever,
Theater.
when you created, when City was created, when you and Anne did that, did you find that there was a collision point with Suzuki?
Oh, very much so. Absolutely.
Is that something you can talk about?
I can. I will say, in terms of the story of the City Company, and I don't know if you know the City Company, it was born out of this collaboration between, and a like-mindedness and an agreement between Anne Bogart and Suzuki Tadashi, and a group of us that were studying, for the most part, although not exclusively, with Suzuki. He was very interested in that. He was interested in the energy, the actual health and well-being of the American actor in the late 70s, early 80s. We were healthy, we were tall, we were loud, we were up for the work that he was doing with his company, and he was attracted to that. And the more he worked with us, just as students, we would come to Japan and study or train with him or learn about it in the States, the more interested he was in establishing something here in the States. He met Anne by trying to find a partner to make this new company. Anne came into the mix with some actors that she knew. Suzuki brought to Anne a group of us, and the collision happened certainly on a personal level between Suzuki and Anne, with great joy and respect. I mean that in the best sense. I think they had a couple of tussles, but they're both pretty non-conflict people when it comes to working out problems. And setting up a new company was a big problem. We did agree to not worry about how to set it up, the superstructure of it, get them enough money, get the administrative stuff. We just made the work first. That's what we did. And all the problems are now coming to bear. The collision point, though, between Suzuki's sensibility and his company's legacy and what they were handing us, and Anne's rich imagination and her set of aesthetic interests, and this idea of asking a set of questions, and that's what we were going to do as a group. We were going to ask a series of questions and then go about answering them through a variety of different ways, so that hopefully the work of the City Company doesn't necessarily always look the same. We don't always go about making our work the same way. It's not an attempt at creating a style that's a hallmark of City. Although I know, of course, we have that because we're the same group. The collision point, I'll tell you who was really caught in the crosshairs was me. Because I was one of the actors in playing Agave in Dionysus, which is Suzuki's Bacchae. And I was also playing Electra in Anne's production of Orestes by Charles Mee. We were doing both of these in red. And Suzuki has a very strong sense of what it means to play a Greek hero. And that is very different from what Chuck Mee writes on the page, if you know his work, and very different from what Anne Bogart brings into the room, if you know how Anne works in a very lateral way, a very horizontal way. And I remember sitting out by the river in Togamura, Japan, every morning, smoking. I'm not a smoker, but it was, I had to smoke in Orestes, and I was just, I couldn't do anything right. The minute I got my dials tuned and calibrated to walk into Dionysus rehearsal, I found myself in Orestes rehearsals, and I wasn't facile enough at the time to recalculate or realize the points of intersection and just ride those, you know, like a bitch, just ride real hard on those. I felt at that time, and that's almost 20 years ago, that I had to be these two completely different actors. And I tried so very hard, and if you've ever been in that situation, you know you end up screwing yourself pretty hard that way. But it was a great learning experience. So I represented the collision and all the problems that will come up out of that.
And hadn't you played agave for a very long time?
A very long time.
How many
Yes.
years?
Well, in the end, I played that role for Suzuki for almost 17 years, which is something we don't get a chance to do certainly in this country. I've had the great privilege in the city company of working somewhat like that, in that we have a repertoire. This is an old, traditional, antique way of living and being in the world as a citizen, is that you have a repertoire, so that the seasons of your life change. And the role becomes something like agave. Am I shutting you down? Are you all right?
No,
All right.
no.
But the role then becomes the sundial. And the sundial, if you know, doesn't change. You change as the sun. So as you change as a performer, this constant tells you what o'clock you are. And I played agave from my young days and into my maturity as a performer. And I grew around that role a skill set that I wasn't realizing at the time were applicable to simply being in the world, being in theater, being a citizen in the world as a theater artist. I've come to understand that. And that is the great thing about staying with one thing for a long time, is you really, really begin to understand the things that are the most important to you, that you want to speak about. And for me, that means the things that I want to share, that I want to actually impart or teach, if you believe you can teach anything in theater. A lot of people don't like that word, they call it coaching, but I've always loved the word teaching.
And as you did it, and as you went around that sundial, did you find that what you wanted to teach with that role changed and varied? Or did you find that was pretty constant?
No, I didn't know anything until it started to emerge from the experience. The things that were constant, the things that I began to see as being a bell tone, that I began to recognize, and then I began to make, as Stanislavski would say, I began to understand the goals. My goals, the goals of the production, Suzuki's goals, Anne's goals, City's goals. And so then it became my responsibility to figure out the runway, to get there. And some of that is a mutual shared experience with my colleagues, and some of it is an individual experience as an artist.
Is that a particular burden of the actor, having to figure out all of those goals from all of those people, or do other artists in the theater have that same onus, or is it just us?
Well, I'm not sure, because I'm only an actor. And when I say that, I mean that I believe that that's a very big term. and carries with it a lot of jobs. I need to know a little bit about the visual arts and design, because I'm in it, I'm of it, I'm part of it. I need to be able to know how to cut a payroll, because if I want to do work my own way, I need to know how to administrate it. I need to know how to talk to a fundraiser, I need blah, 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 right? And when you're small and making work, as we need to do with limited resource, you learn to do many, many things. But I'm speaking from a very particular point of view, because I've been lucky. The people that have been my mentors and colleagues and friends are two very distinct theater directors. And for many reasons, and this isn't the night to talk about why those reasons came up. A lot of it dumb luck, a lot of it hard work, some skill, some talent, but opportunity as much as anything. And that's the word I want to go at. It's not the burden on the contemporary actor, it's the opportunity. That for me, a life of conflict and collision and difficulty is really invigorating. Really invigorating. And we have to do that now. We have to find meaningful obstacles and hopefulness from facing off with those obstacles. That may sound a bit generic and like I'm blowing smoke up your ass, and it's not. I really, really believe that the obstacle can't be steep enough. Just bring it. And I do think it falls on the actor, because I think of all the theater artists in making work, the actor is responsible for creating and pulling together the traditional world and the contemporary, and I say this a lot when I teach. And that burden perhaps falls heaviest on the actor. Pull those two things into a single experience for the artist, the audience.
Which again reminds me of your definition of the avant-garde, the contemporary and the traditional.
I think it's a collision.
And that collision.
I also think that that's what character means, in terms of what, I'm sure in there you've got a question. Do you believe in character?
We talked about that. Yeah, we talked about that. Because I'm not so sure the jury's out for me.
I always throw that out in class, and I had a great time. I worked with Nick at Juilliard, so we're old colleagues.
Yes.
And I would say things like, "There's no such thing as character." So now's his chance to sort of
figure that out.
Bullshit. But I think that those things, when I say there's no such thing, what I mean is there's not this thing outside of the self. Character is really only when one's artistic skills meet an artistic experience, and there's frisson. That's all character is. And artistic experience is inclusive of the text that you're doing, and the space in which you're standing and being in, and the environment or the logic, and the atmosphere of the room, what you're wearing, who you're saying it to and with. But all of those things make up this image called character. Oh, I loved your character. But that's actually what an audience is perceiving as being part of it.
And then we spend all this time in acting school or in Stanislavski book writing our whole character journal. This whole kind of tone that if we make up enough crap about this fictional person on the page, it's not in the page.
It's really
but like if I decide what he ate for breakfast this morning, all of a sudden I'm going to be able to play
whatever
Hamlet.
floats your boat,
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, really? I don't want to sound dogmatic here, and I tend to, so forgive me. I don't mean to be strident, because if I want to say, I think Hecuba has Ovaltine in the morning, that, I can make sense out of that, because then I can say, no shit, she does, because how else is she getting up and down off that ground? And okay, bring it. What's next? Bam! Wow! Oh. So I can actually make a logic
actually
that
use
way.
that character journal.
Yes. there's a little bit of a, I'll take the, I'll actually just speak on behalf of my company, if I may, and say we are often asked, well, or it's assumed that we are not interested in a psychological or emotional verisimilitude or homework, or nothing could be further from the truth. It may be that we don't enter in that way first and foremost, but that's always the goal, is the level and richness of the emotional experience in the room between human beings and the exchange of that, this cyclical exchange between you and me and you and the receiver.
And it comes down to what people decide is verisimilitude, I guess, or what. I mean, when that criticism is leveled at the city company or at the Word,
yeah,
you have to think.
which it always is, and that's good. You're supposed to be pushed hard.
What makes you think what? I mean, I think that's a lot of the root of the question. I feel like I'm starting this whole thing with a question, like you said, your work comes from this question of what is that natural, realness. That lovely John Lee baby set with the Lazy Susan with all the spice rack inside that makes people feel like that's a play.
I love those sets.
I love them too. They're amazing. But what is that thing that those critics or those people who are leveling that criticism looking for?
Well,
And where does that come? Where's that fed from?
I mean, far be it from me to speak really authoritatively on it. I do think there are some basic things that are very hard to do while speaking the written word. And that counts for a lot. In other words, for me, well, we can all agree, right? There's nothing real about it. There's no sense of verisimilitude except what's actually happening on a physical level, the physics of what are actually happening in the room. And for me, the ability for the artist, whether we're creative or interpretive as actors, that's something we can all gnaw on that bone for a while, but the ability to hold one's body in an objective light and the ability to use space and time, the ability to be still. And when speaking the written word, this is a very, very difficult thing to do. It's a different thing than we're told. It's a different thing than we're taught, is to actually hold still and to have a physical experience while speaking the written word. That is, and those of you who have been in the studio with me know that's my thing. That is the single most difficult task for the actor, is to have as rich and constant a physical experience while speaking the written word, and keep those two things at a very, very high level in your consciousness and objectivity, while you're having, and hopefully having, because of that concentration, a very rich emotional experience in the room, intellectual experience, doing all those things you need to do. You need to be the voice of the playwright, right? But that's not the only job, and that's a big problem now in this idea of verisimilitude, that you're supposed to represent the playwright's idea, which for me couldn't be further from the truth. It is part of your task. But if that were your task, then it simply is better to get a big box of the texts and throw them at the audience and tell them what page to read. Because it's just a digit. Yes, it represents human energy and thought, but you have to make it analog. And that's a whole other set of decision-making skills and steps. Does that make any sense to you?
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but you've had class with me. Does that make any sense to you guys? That is, if you think about it though, that really is the job, to keep a physical experience at a very, very heightened level. And I don't mean that you're clinging to the ceiling. It can look like behaving normally in a kitchen with a spice rack and your dog is dead. Right? Those kind of plays, that kind of situation. But there's really nothing real about what it is you're doing, except managing those things. Managing the invisible. That must be it. Managing the invisible. Because that's really what you're working with. Yeah.
If I may go backwards in time for you, before you went to Japan. Rewind the flashback, the Ellen Lauren flashback. Before you went to Japan, you were working all over the place, here in the States, doing plays with Spice Rex about dead dogs.
Yeah, some of them.
A lot of
Some of them.
naturalistic, normal plays.
Yeah, some of them were.
What was your way of working like then, and what led you to start working in a different way, or led you to Suzuki in Japan? Because that happened before City, right? And before Anne, I know it happened
Yes,
before City.
I met Anne in Japan
Yeah.
through Suzuki. He invited her to come see the premiere of Dionysus a long time ago. And I met her after that performance, and it was so strange, because she went to high school with my brother. Right? Yeah, crazy, because Anne and I, both our parents, our fathers knew each other from the Navy. We were Navy juniors. So anyway, I met Anne in Japan, but before that and I want to clarify, I wasn't all over the place. I actually had a very limited experience in terms of what it means to be an actor in this country. I've never had a manager, I've never had an agent, I've never done an audition process as a daily bread and butter skill, and I have such unbelievable respect for that. I have many, again, colleagues and friends who do that, and I'm just constantly asking how they do it, and they're so good at it. They seem so good at it. Anyway, I don't know how to do that. I was in the regional theater. Prior to that, if you really want to go back, I came from a very disciplined background. I was an equestrian on the United States equestrian team. And I was asked to get off the team by the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, for a lot of reasons. It wasn't substance abuse, I'll tell you that. So just get that out of your little But it was for other reasons, some of which was not maintaining my amateur status and taking money. There, it's out. But many athletes do. So I was coming from an athletic background, and parallel to that, I was drawn to make plays the way we're all drawn into the theater. I left the equestrian world, and I went up into the mountains of West Virginia, and I bought a little house. I was just going to drop out. And I went to West Virginia University because it was right there, and it was almost free. It was so cheap. But at that time, there just happened to be, you know, the artist Viola Spolin, and Paul Sills, her son. She was teaching there, and there was just this amazing group of people, and I fell in with them and started a life that was already this thing called the alternative or the avant-garde, devised improvisation, and I loved that. And then I did Shaw plays and all. And I went out, my first job was touring federal penitentiaries in an improvisational company. And I have to tell you the name of it because it was under a program, a government program, which is, you know, all gone, these programs, but it was called Project Culture. Yeah. Swear to God. Now listen to this. Creative use of leisure time under restrictive environment. Yeah. And I toured. Yeah. And we would go into penitentiaries and do workshops with the prisoners. the inmates, and we did everything from moderate to maximum prisons. And I did that for a year and a half. And it was great. But then I realized, I don't know why, but when we have these bolts, that I really, really wanted to do Shakespeare, you know? I really wanted to be an actor that could stand up and just crack one over the green monster with the big stuff. Just pitch it at me, and I want to be able to do it. So now what do I do in the United States? Well, you go to grad school. So I went, and at that time I was with a girlfriend, Frances McDormand, auditioning. She got into Yale. I got into another place. I went to that other place. But I only went to that other place for a year and a half, and then I started working. And then from that point on, I worked in the American Regional Theater. And I just went from excitement to boredom in a pretty systematic way over a course of 10 or 12 years in the American Regional Theater. And I tried everything to stay engaged. And I had a very good lifestyle, all things considered. But then I got exposed to this cat in Japan named Suzuki.
Boredom, I'm sorry, I'm just going
Yeah.
to go on that. Boredom with, can you talk about the boredom? Boredom with the plays, with the roles, with the process?
Well, I was doing the Shakespeare, and I didn't, even though I was in companies, and at that time, the regional theater, at that time, back when the kill with Jade, there were companies, we were companies, you know, at the Alley Theater, and I was in Massachusetts at a theater, and I was in the Milwaukee Rep, and in an acting company, and I think there are still a few. But even still, for me, they became less and less a definition of what company is, which is shared artistic experience. And shared artistic experience isn't making plays. Plays are what you do with that shared artistic experience. That's the product of the experience together. And what was that experience? And that was what I couldn't find. We partied and, you know, fucked each other and those kind of things. But I just kept getting more and more bored. I'm sorry I said that.
I take all out post.
But that was what I was missing. And the plays were good or they were not good. It wasn't about that. It was about something else that could happen and transpire between the people in the room on a lateral level. And that meant a shared experience, which meant a shared vocabulary, which meant something bigger than all of us, exponentially in the room. So, and then I met Suzuki, and that was what this cat was doing with his company, and with so much generosity and ferocity. This group of people shared that point of view about how to be in the world, how to be. And I was deeply, deeply influenced, along with other people, and who are, to this day, many of them my colleagues. And although I think we each have a different takeaway from that, we do have some common nuts that we hit on, and that have kept us together for now entering our third decade, where everything else falls away, and those are the bankable things in the room, is that thing that constantly refreshes you, the thing that's constantly refreshing us as people, the things that we can't quite answer, the questions that still keep coming up, and the delight in one another's conversation with the things outside of us and with one another. So the boredom, I think that's where it came from.
And you still now do plays outside of the company on occasion.
I work with Suzuki.
But just Suzuki and City now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild,
So
isn't
it's
it?
been a while since you've worked outside of the company with a group of actors.
Yeah, I just got asked to do Paulina in the Seagull at the Alley Theater, and I called up the director and I said, "Are you fucking kidding me? Paulina, you need to rent a Sky. Oh, I'm there, but
Yeah.
like Paulina." There are small rules. Actually.
I mean, this is the thing that this is the thing I think I could speak for many of my friends in this room are so very jealous of, is this company, this thing you have, this way you get to talk to each other, because so many of us working, you end up being thrown together in a room with all these people from various places, various temperaments, various levels of experience, various aesthetic taste, and we start working, and we listen to the director, and we do that, and then that's what we all try to do, and then we try to stay out of each other's way.
Is that really how you're working?
Not always. It depends on the company. It depends on the company, and then certain things open up, certain conversations open up, usually at a bar when you're partying, or when you're fucking each other, and, or fucking with each other. Things open up and you realize, oh, ally, like mind, let's start,
Yeah.
and then sometimes you hit a room, when we're very, very, very lucky. I had that experience in this room last fall. With Little Foxes, you just get in this room and everyone's
This is
like,
a great room.
boom, and you can really, really go and all get on the page and feel like, as an actor, you're, contributing to this, the aesthetic piece, being a part, like you described, of helping all these goals in line.
I have to tell you one thing about this room.
This was
One of our first pieces was called The Medium here. This was an apartment where we lived. Those of us who didn't live in the city yet lived in this room. An apartment. That's
with the same skyline.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
But where?
What do I do, Ellen? What do I do? What do we all do? And how do we create this vocabulary with each other?
Well, I want to clarify. I walk two sides of this. One is that I worked really, really hard, and in some ways you got to be careful what you wish for, because you might get it if you work really hard. Which is, I do have this extraordinary relationship with two wildly different artists, and I have to make sense of that. At the same time, I'm envious, and I feel like, well, maybe that's not always so good for me, that I do need to take a leap and go play Paulina. Which, I was making a joke about, that just actually wouldn't work out in my life right now, but that I should do that. I think there's company, and then particularly in this city, there's another company like us right now. There's this group that we're always in relationship to and working with, and in dialogue with and disagreeing with, but that it's all around us. It exists, this company. I mean, New York Theater Workshop happens to be one of the oases for us to come and gather and talk, or come and see the work that they're doing on the stage. But this idea of company is being reimagined right now, I think, in this city. I think it's being reimagined all over the world, because I have the great privilege of working with people who are coming to study with City or Suzuki from all over the world. This is one of the great gifts in my life, is meeting artists from all over and disagreeing with them, learning from them. But for instance, you're in a company, you're actually building with wanting to do something like this. You've got a constituency and a group of people that you're working with, your brain is whizzing with already. So I have great faith in that. But you do need leadership, and that's really missing in the world today. And I don't know where it's going to come from. I do and I don't. I mean the Anne Bogarts and the Tadashi Suzukis of the world. Major seminal thinkers. People who changed the tide. And I'm not sure what's going on with that. The Grotowskis. Where are they? Who are they? I'm saying I don't know.
I know.
Well, we had a pre-chat together before everyone came, and you said, we were talking about all the different artists who are coming to do this series, and we were wondering who, because they're a
Yeah.
lot, most of them of your generation,
Yeah,
who that next generation is as well. Of
and they're there, I just
performers.
might not, because I live in a fairly insulated world. And I know Suzuki's asking this, he's really asking this question, and Anne, as an educator alone, is influencing a whole new generation of people, there's no question about it. But you are one, I am wondering, who is taking that and just really, really ripping open something new? And I wonder.
I can't believe to say this, but we've actually been going for 45 minutes, and I swore I would allow other people in the room to talk to you other than me. So I'll say, even though I'm only on page 2.
You can hand it to
of my
somebody.
Proust
Here's your
questionnaire. I can throw it at, hurl it at them, tell them page 17. But I guess I'll open it up to you guys too, to talk and continue the you know, it's just a conversation in a room, you know.
I have a question. I'm pretty sure that I saw you in, can't think of the title, I'm embarrassed to say, but it was the Georgia Mark play. That
Oh.
was all drawn from quantum theory.
Quantum and
Yeah, it was the
Classic
craziest thing I've ever seen in
physics.
my life.
Yeah, Tom and I did that. It's a piece called Going, Going, Gone.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was
You saw that, wow, you're the one.
Yeah, my husband is a director, and we met Anne at UVA. I'm much older than him, but we were engaged, and she came down to UVA when he was getting his master's or whatever, so we had a lovely day with her. Anyway, sidebar. But I was quite blown away with everything about it, and I'm embarrassed that it's the only city production I've seen. But what in the structure of it, in what was systematic and physically alive and so vital about it, like blew me out. I wondered about where does organic, how do you find an organic life when that structure is so defined? Not that, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, you do a show every night and you're in repetition and you know your boundaries and you know what you're doing and you have to bring it to life. So I realized there's an aspect that has to come to life within that. But I don't know.
I'm trying to answer that. Well, first I'll say, Tom, please pipe in, because we made a piece called Going, Going, Gone, which was we staged Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, much to Mr. Alva's dismay. And we removed the text, and we put in basically an argument between classical and quantum physics. So that it was Anne, let's see if I can clarify why. Anne was on this, as she gets, just fascinated and consumed with physics and wrapping her head around it and listening to these tapes. And she realized that as she drove, and pop in a tape, this is how old this was, tape. As she drove and was busy, she was actually understanding what she just heard, rather than sitting there and listening to Stephen Hawking and trying to really grok it. So she had this idea that if you do something while trying to come at the audience with information, they might hear something and put it together on a level that you can't get reading it. That would exponentially also be a theatrical event in the room that was emotional and visceral and, rip snorter. But what we had was a script that had the Virginia Woolf text on one side and then its doppelganger on the other side of the classical or quantum stuff that was sampled from all this material. I mean, dense stuff. But we're playing Virginia Woolf. I may be shouting about a black hole.
You always knew what relationships were. That was crazy.
Yeah, but it was a real mind twist.
Yeah.
And that you may have had a different experience, Tom, but we would go line, and you get a wormhole, and then you go, subtext. And you get, what a duck, George, what's that from? What a duck, Okay, now my line is God does not play dice. Oh, God does not play dice. Oh, what's subtext? It was just so complicated until it did become. And I think what you were watching was that collision,
Yeah.
and skills meeting experience. And which is why I love these directors, Suzuki and Anne. They bring experience. They slam it down on the table. Both incredibly different, but both with a respect to the thing that the audience is perceiving is the experience of the actor. That is the thing that has sustained the theater and will sustain the theater, and that is what they serve up. That is it. And so I think that's what you were watching. It was kind of a rock show, wasn't it?
Totally.
Yeah. I don't know, you want to add to that, Tom, or? I keep wishing we do that piece again, although it's probably fairly antiquated, some of the arguments in it.
No one would ever know that.
They'd just be like, oh my God, he's strangling her. And shouting about black holes.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about that collision, because I think we think of it a lot now as the collision between
Egos.
but yes, but something technical and something organic, and then being opposing,
Yeah.
and that, even as an actor, if you're in a fairly naturalistic play and you're asked just to freeze
Yeah.
while another scene happens over here and then it comes back to you, that interruption of the sort of organic life you built up, I think, as an actor, or when I'm directing and I ask someone to freeze, I can see the actor, how do I freeze and still maintain an organic life? So I guess it's the same collision we're talking about, but I feel like that's where process as an actor always gets tricky.
It does get tricky, and I think that's hard on you as a director, because the actor has to constantly be reminded that the theater is a poetical environment. It's a place of metaphor, and it's a poetical landscape. It is not what do I mean? I mean, and Anne says this so much more beautifully than I, but the things we do in the theater are the things that look stupid on film. Well, they look dumb when they're put into that medium, because it's a place of scale. We're dealing with really, really large things or really, really small things. We're dealing with unbelievable movement or this quality of stillness that we can't find anymore or don't know how to literally do technically in our contemporary world. The quality of a heightened stillness, and an artist who knows how to control that, a director who knows how to guide that. A language of not using the word freeze, and finding other words that represent the poetical logic and atmosphere, what you're trying to create, that an actor can grab onto and have an organic experience in a suspension, right? Very, very, very much so. But these are the conversations that have to have, and the conversations are the shared experience out of which the play comes. I agree with you, though, that the word collision, I'm often called on it or nailed on it, and that it somehow implies that people come to insurmountable odds, and that somebody has to win, and somebody has to give up, and that it entails personality differences and power in the room. And that's not what I'm talking about, although those things, because we're human beings, come up. But that's why we do theater. That those things are supposed to come up, and then we're supposed to represent how we work through those things, and then we bring that to bear in front of an audience. Because to have the worst kind of fight on stage, right, you have to have the most collaborative agreement between you as human beings. So we all know that.
I love poetical language.
Yeah, language of poetry.
Yeah, because that's all.
Language of poetry.
sometimes literally we're speaking in a fucking language of poetry, and then it's completely unimaginable, sometimes as actors, that, oh, that's actually what I have to do. Yeah, it's great, okay, I'm gonna stop talking about other people talking, because I will continue to talk. It's marijuana.
You said you do and you don't know where the next generation of leaders, like and students is coming from.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to hear you talk about the part of you that does know where.
Well, I have the great fortune in that I teach, and I teach in a lot of different venues. I teach at Juilliard, which is like, Juilliard, it's Juilliard, right? It's Juilliard. It's very respectable and system.
I think there are too many people in this room who went there.
No, I can't, really, there's not enough time. I'm so grateful that I'm exposed to it, because I feel like I'm going there. I get to sit in on faculty meetings with these brilliant people, brilliant people. But it's a very particular kind of system. I teach in my own studios with my company, my colleagues. We teach on every day. We're running, some of you guys are attending that right now. I teach for Suzuki, and so I'm in a lot of different venues around the world that way. And so I'm exposed to artists, particularly in the situations where the artists are coming to take the work that I am sharing. And so there's a particular curiosity from the kind of person that seeks this work out, a particular kind of courage and tenacity, spiritually as well as physically. And so, for instance, there's somebody in this room that I met in Finland that just made me laugh. I like them as a person. I've come to know them now a little bit more because they keep getting drawn back to the training that I teach. And I'm coming to see that person as a very important artist in his generation, it's about. And that as a performer and what he's capable of doing. I don't know, when I say where's the Suzukis, where are the Anns, it's because I'm not privy right now in the studios and in the rehearsal processes of these artists that I'm able to see what it is they're innovating and doing. And honestly, I have not so far this autumn gotten out enough to see enough work because I've been on the West Coast doing the piece we just finished. That's a lame-o answer, and I am hesitant to name names, I guess, out of respect.
Yeah, okay.
But I do sense it, and it's not just individuals. Maybe that's what I want to say. It is collectives, it is groups that I'm seeing that are either influenced by the city company in some way and have gotten together, or I'm seeing people, yeah, I'll leave it at that. That it can be a group that can change things. And that's not looked at enough in this country. The group aesthetic, the idea of the group in a country that celebrates the individual as getting up off with your own bootstraps, and that the independent artist, the individual is what we really, really celebrate in US of A, not the group aesthetic. It's a dirty word. It really is. It's a group.
Because it makes you social.
It's a social, it's dirty.
Can you talk a little about your relationship with the different directors that you do work with? Because it really struck me when you said that we actually go into rehearsal here as individuals, and then as the social structures break down and we get loose, we find our allies. But it's a secret. When we connect artistically, it's a secret. We don't want the director to feel, because the director thinks we're ganging up, trying to take the play away, and it's you know, what I think what brought us all into this strange world in the first place was the connection and going, you have the same question that I do, and you know, these texts that like, okay, let's all like raise this and see what we can figure out about, you know, our questions, but then we start trying to make a living out of it, and we have these directors who didn't come from the same training.
You know, even as an actor, if you're in a fairly naturalistic play and you're asked just to freeze
Yeah.
while another scene happens over here and then it comes back to you, that interruption of the sort of organic life you built up, I think, as an actor, or when I'm directing and I ask someone to freeze, I can see the actor, how do I freeze and still maintain an organic life? So I guess it's the same collision we're talking about, but I feel like that's where process as an actor always gets tricky.
It does get tricky, and I think that's hard on you as a director, because the actor has to constantly be reminded that the theater is a poetical environment. It's a place of metaphor, and it's a poetical landscape. It is not what do I mean? I mean, and Anne says this so much more beautifully than I, but the things we do in the theater are the things that look stupid on film. Or they look dumb when they're put into that medium, because it's a place of scale. We're dealing with really, really large things or really, really small things. We're dealing with unbelievable movement or this quality of stillness that we can't find anymore or don't know how to literally do technically in our contemporary world. The quality of a heightened stillness, and an artist who knows how to control that, a director who knows how to guide that, a language of not using the word freeze, you know, and finding other words that represent the poetical logic and atmosphere, what you're trying to create, that an actor can grab onto and have an organic experience in a suspension, right? Very, very, very much so. But these are the conversations that have to have, and the conversations are the shared experience out of which the play comes. I agree with you, though, that the word collision, I'm often called on it or nailed on it, and that it somehow implies that people come to insurmountable odds, and that somebody has to win, and somebody has to give up, and that it entails personality differences and power in the room. And that's not what I'm talking about, although those things, because we're human beings, come up. But that's why we do theater. That those things are supposed to come up, and then we're supposed to represent how we work through those things, and then we bring that to bear in front of an audience. Because to have the worst kind of fight on stage, right, you have to have the most collaborative agreement between you as human beings. So we all know that.
I love poetical language.
Yeah, language of poetry.
Yeah, because that's all.
Language of poetry.
And sometimes literally we're speaking in a fucking language of poetry, and then it's completely unimaginable sometimes as actors that, oh, that's actually what I have to do. Yeah. Right, okay. I'm gonna stop talking about other people talking, because I will continue to talk. Some marijuana.
You said you do and you don't know where the next generation of leaders like Anne is coming from.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to hear you talk about the part of you that does know where
Well, I have the great fortune in that I teach, and I teach in a lot of different venues. I teach at Juilliard, you know, which is like, Juilliard, it's Juilliard, right? It's Juilliard. It's very respectable and system.
I think there are too many people in this room who went there.
No, I can't, really, there's not enough time. I'm so grateful that I'm exposed to it, because I feel like I'm going there. I get to sit in on faculty meetings with these brilliant people, brilliant people. But it's a very particular kind of system. I teach in my own studios with my company, my colleagues. We teach on every day. We're running, some of you guys are attending that right now. I teach for Suzuki, and so I'm in a lot of different venues around the world that way. And so I'm exposed to artists, particularly in the situations where the artists are coming to take the work that I am sharing. And so there's a particular curiosity and from the kind of person that seeks this work out, a particular kind of courage and tenacity, spiritually as well as physically. And so, for instance, there's somebody in this room that I met in Finland that just made me laugh. I like them as a person. I've come to know them now a little bit more because they keep getting drawn back to the training that I teach. And I'm coming to see that person as a very important artist in his generation. It's about. And that as a performer and what he's capable of doing. I don't know when I say where's the Suzukis, where are the ands, it's because I'm not privy right now in the studios and in the rehearsal processes of these artists that I'm able to see what it is they're innovating and doing. And honestly, I have not so far this autumn gotten out enough to see enough work because I've been on the West Coast doing the piece we just finished. That's a lame-o answer, and I am hesitant to name names, I guess, out of respect.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do sense it, and it's not just individuals. Maybe that's what I want to say. It is collectives, it is groups that I'm seeing that are either influenced by the city company in some way and have gotten together, or I'm seeing people, yeah, I'll leave it at that. That it can be a group that can change things. And that's not looked at enough in this country. The group aesthetic, the idea of the group in a country that celebrates the individual as getting up off with your own bootstraps, and that the independent artist, the individual is what we really, really celebrate in the US of A, not the group aesthetic. It's a dirty word. It really is. It's a group.
Because it makes you social.
It's a socialist, it's dirty.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about your relationship with the different directors that you do work with? Because it really struck me when you said that we actually go into rehearsal here as individuals, and then as the social structures break down and we get loose, we find our allies. But it's a secret. When we connect artistically, it's a secret. We don't want the director to feel, because the director thinks we're ganging up, or that the company's trying to take the play away. And it's, what brought us all into this strange world in the first place was the connection and going, you have the same question that I do, and these texts that okay, let's all raise this and see what we can figure out about our questions. But then we start trying to make a living out of it, and we have these directors who didn't come from the same training program, who use a different language. That all of a sudden we all disappear in the room, and then we talk, behind, in corners of rooms. And I was just wondering, what's your experience, and how do you relate to the director, and how does your directors relate to you, even though they're very different with each other? I mean,
Yeah.
what is the artistic communication that happens?
Well, the perception of Suzuki is that I come in, people ask me this a lot, and if you know anything about Suzuki, his reputation is of being a very, he has strong points of view. So the perception is that Suzuki tells me what to do, and then I just hang on for dear life and try to pull that off. But nothing could be further from the truth, in the sense that I've never met a another director where I'm more responsible for what it is I bring to bear in the rehearsal room than Suzuki. And in this way, Suzuki honors the theater artist, actor, above and beyond anything else in the theater. Loves them, loves them. But it comes with great responsibility. And he's also he's a master at what it is he's looking for and at. He is a master of the stage. He's a master of the craft of acting. You may not agree with it or like it, but he is a master of it. And so the relationship is, I put out a lot of material and I get a lot of response back. And then he lets me free fall. And then he'll say, well, you know, you're playing that like Beethoven and it's Mozart. You know, and you go home to your hotel room like, oh God. But when I get feedback from him like that, and that's literally something he told me on opening night of King Lear, and I had an hour and a half before the curtain was up. I have to make really quick choices, really, really fast decisions. What am I going to do? What does that mean? It can't mean, for me, some sort of I got to change my mindset and think more Mozart. It means I'm breathing wrong. It means I have to restructure where I'm breathing. It means that I'm probably speaking too staccato. It means that when I'm stopping my body, I'm braking and I'm telegraphing that to the audience. I have to translate it into the language that he's also taught me and come back with a poetical response. When I work with Anne, when we work with Anne, this is something where maybe you've seen Anne at play or at work. You could, if we all had brown bags on our heads and you came in to see us working, which already makes me laugh thinking about that, you wouldn't know who Anne is. You would not be able to figure out who is the director. You would be just baffled. You would have Brian Scott, who's our company lighting designer, who's doing your show right now. He would be gassing on about something. Darren West, our sound designer, as many of you maybe know Darren, is one of the great dramaturgs, if such a thing exists, in this country. Just one of the great storytellers. And then the actors. And Anne is, among other things, she's a provocateur. And she has said this herself. She starts things. She gets the gas, she gets the match, and she goes, and then she's out. Almost to the point you want to go, would you please get in a little more? But that's the dialogue. She's so smart about it. She's really out, and you think, and she's talking about some dumb thing like this should be like this instead of this. But she's actually watching that happening. Watching you figure something out. It's happening very, very laterally in the room. And then when we hit a disagreement, which is all the time, because company doesn't mean you get along or agree, it means you agree to disagree, so to speak. What happens then is we stand around in silence sometimes, and we wait until we figure it out. And when we get stuck, we quit, and we go home. And when we're not on a roll, and this is a problem we have because we're in the union and we have to work by all these rules, but we don't often. But it's very, very horizontal. You wouldn't necessarily know what Anne does. She's very sly about it. And as a result, I have learned, my colleagues have learned how to do a lot of different things and learned how to watch and how to read and how to write for one another, right? So I'm writing with my body, I'm writing with my choices, and now it's the rest of us read it. We use that kind of language when we talk about the viewpoints, for instance, writing and reading as a poetical language. So I'm trying to think of the last director. We worked with Richard Foreman a little bit this summer because we are interested in starting to cross-pollinate with other people, and Anne is so busy. And that was a gas, that was just wild. And Richard was in the room with us, and he sort of enjoyed going, oh, I think I know where everything is here. And this thing actually has some giddy up in it. And that was a whole different set of stimuli to get from Richard. I don't know if you've ever worked with him, but it's so fun and active and absolutely different